The 1970s gave us some of the most violent war films ever made. Movies so extreme that censors cut scenes, slapped on X ratings, and in some cases banned the films outright. There was Anthony Quinn in a Nazi torture thriller that got pulled from theaters. A Western massacre so extreme that television refused to show it uncut for over 20 years. And a Vietnam drama so graphic Turner Classic still aired the censored cut decades later. These weren't the safe Hollywood war movies of the 40s and 50s. These were the ones that governments and studios tried to bury. The Passage is a World War II thriller set in the snowy Pyrenees with Anthony Quinn playing a farmer helping a scientist and his family escape the Nazis. Seems simple enough, but the real reason this film is remembered is Malcolm McDowell as a psychopathic SS officer. His scenes of torture, assault, and murder were so extreme that censors in several countries either banned the film or made heavy cuts. Even in the UK, The Passage got slapped with an X rating, and its most graphic moments basically limited any kind of wide release. This was 1979, and of course it was too much for people back then, so censors in the West responded with bans and restrictions. For the record, James Mason, who was in the cast, predicted the movie would bomb right after filming. He wasn't wrong. It flopped worldwide, critics hated it, and even Malcolm McDowell later said, "I took it only because I needed money to pay my taxes," making it depressed me terribly. This is one of the very first Vietnam War movies to actually show how brutal and messy that war was. It came out the same year as The Deer Hunter and Coming Home, but didn't get the same attention. In a lot of ways, it's basically the blueprint for what Kubrick did later in Full Metal Jacket. This isn't some patriotic story. It's about the dehumanization, the drug use, and the plain absurdity that American soldiers faced. It's not really anti-military, but it's definitely critical, and it's a lot grittier and less sentimental than the usual Hollywood take. The violence and the bleakness are right up front until the grim ending, so much so that Turner Classic Movies only aired the censored version for years. Roger Ebert put it best: the movie starts by being funny and ends by being very deeply moving. At first glance, Shout at the Devil looks like a big old-fashioned adventure. Lee Marvin and Roger Moore, World War I Africa, a little bit of swashbuckling. But then the violence kicks in and it's jarring. There's a firing squad executing a child, mass slaughter during raids. These moments landed it right in the censors' crosshairs. Back in the day, the brutality was just too much for mainstream release. The UK cut the film for violence in 1976, only approving it after edits to scenes like the execution and some of the bloodier moments. The movie itself jumps between cornball action and sudden, shocking violence, which honestly left a lot of critics uneasy. Roger Ebert called it big, dumb, silly, but even he admitted it's impossible to dislike, unless, of course, you were a censor trying to keep that stuff off the screen. Soldier Blue might be the most notorious of the bunch when it comes to on-screen violence. This is a film that ends with a U.S. cavalry massacre of Cheyenne villagers, and it doesn't hold back. Women and children shown mutilated, blood everywhere. Audiences were so horrified at preview screenings that people started chanting, "Burn the theater," during the climax. Censors cut out huge sections, including the entire massacre, for its first TV airing in 1980. It wasn't shown uncut on British TV until 22 years later. In other places like Australia, it was initially refused a rating at all. Even in the US, the backlash was huge. Protesters, including the American Legion, objected to what they saw as an anti-American message, and the distributor ended up toning down the marketing just to keep it from becoming a political firestorm. The director defended the violence as necessary, but Soldier Blue became infamous as the most savage film in history. Francis Ford Coppola's Vietnam epic is legendary for its production nightmares, but also for the violence and the sheer madness on screen. The film is packed with brutal combat scenes and even a real water buffalo beheading that still shocks people today. In the US, it managed an R rating, but other countries went much further. South Korea banned the film entirely, officially for anti-war themes, but also for its graphic content. In Europe, censors cut out entire sequences until the movie barely made sense. Even in the places where it wasn't outright banned, the violence was enough to shock critics and audiences. The movie's reputation has only grown, but it's easy to forget just how many censors tried to keep it from ever being seen in its true form. Sam Peckinpah only did one World War II movie, but he went all in. You've got James Coburn leading a German platoon on the Russian front, just guys trying to survive while their officer, Maximilian Schell, is more interested in medals than men. It's classic Peckinpah. The whole cast gets put through hell and the violence is relentless. It's one of the most honest war films ever made, especially with the focus on German soldiers as actual human beings, not just villains or cannon fodder. The battle scenes are massive, full of slow-motion carnage and practical effects. Soldiers torn apart by explosions, graphic injuries, no sugarcoating. It was never banned outright, but a lot of countries tried to censor it. All the blood and gore and that infamous assault scene. Orson Welles called this the best war movie since All Quiet on the Western Front, and honestly, you get why. It's deliberately violent with no apologies. A lot of people don't realize there was a late 70s remake of All Quiet on the Western Front, and it's a lot more graphic than most folks remember. This was a TV movie in the US, but it got a cinema release overseas. The full version runs 150 minutes and goes all in on trench warfare. The violence is front and center. Guys losing limbs, bayonet fights, even a soldier's face melted by gas. It's not trying to spare the viewer. For theaters outside the US, the film was cut down by more than 20 minutes, almost all of it just to tone down the violence and get the runtime under control. A scene where a French soldier is literally cut in half by artillery got axed for some audiences. Even with the edits, there are tanks running over soldiers in trenches and plenty of adult-only ratings. Since 2000, most releases use the uncut version, but back in the day it was considered way too much for general audiences. Too Late, The Hero is one of those movies that's always been a little under the radar, but the violence made censors nervous. It's a Pacific War story with Michael Caine playing an insubordinate soldier, and the rest of the patrol are basically just trying to make it out alive. The ending is grim. Almost the entire squad gets wiped out, and it doesn't pull punches about what happens to these guys. In the UK, it got an X rating right away. Adults only because of the intensity of the gun battles in a bayonet fight that for 1970 was pushing the envelope. It's not non-stop gore, but the tone is relentless enough that censors felt younger viewers shouldn't see it. Financially, it was a disaster. Lost nearly $7 million, one of ABC Films' biggest flops. Director Robert Aldrich always stood by it, though. He never understood why it didn't connect with people, but even he admitted it was a tough movie. Before Tarantino made his own version, there was the original Inglorious Bastards, a violent, Italian-produced, English-language war film about escaped Allied prisoners making their own mission behind Nazi lines. It's unashamedly a grindhouse movie. The violence is right up front, bullet hits, a decapitation with piano wire, and a finale where bodies pile up by the hundreds. The MPAA gave it an R, but that didn't mean much in other markets. TV and video releases cut the most brutal moments, like a scalping scene and extra gore, just to get it on the air. It's a cult favorite for a reason. It doesn't back off from being violent, and that's exactly why it ended up censored or cut in a lot of places. But Tarantino loved it so much that when he did Inglorious Bastards in 2009, he bought the rights to the original just to use the title. This one's British, big cast, Richard Burton, Roger Moore, Richard Harris, and basically just a full-on mercenary movie set in Africa. Think Dirty Dozen, but even rougher. The plot's familiar. Mercenaries go in for a rescue mission and everything goes sideways. The gunplay is constant, and the violence is a lot nastier than people expected in the late 70s. The film doesn't look away from ugly moments. You've got a child soldier bayoneting a mercenary, entrails spilling out, another guy dying from a poison gas attack. The scale of the violence was enough to get an adults-only rating in the UK. On home video, some prints cut out animal cruelty scenes and trimmed some of the harsher moments. The ads actually bragged about how gritty and realistic it was, and they weren't kidding. It's one of the most violent war movies of its era, and the censors had to step in more than once to dial it back.